For almost 10 years, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, has provided temporary protection from deportation, a work permit, and a social security number to people who entered the United States as children without the proper documents to migrate, are currently living in the U.S., and have or are working toward a high school diploma or GED. These protections were the result of young, undocumented people who were tired of hitting a ceiling when trying to enter college. Young, undocumented people all over the United States organized for years to have their right to live and work in this country acknowledged. When the DREAM Act failed to pass the Senate in 2010, protests all over the country increased. Young people walked miles across the country from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. And in 2012, some occupied campaign offices of then-President Obama, asking for a simple thing. President Obama signed an executive order to immediately stop the deportation of all DREAM-eligible youth. Their tireless advocacy and organizing efforts mobilized the majority of Americans to support them. So President Obama first announced the DACA program as an executive order on June 15 of 2012. After this continued pressure from young undocumented people, the faith community who came alongside them, and immigration advocates. Under DACA, almost 700,000 people were able to apply for and receive work permits and protection from deportation. For the 700,000 individuals who qualified for DACA, the program has meant they can apply for a work permit and a social security number to provide for themselves and their families and to contribute to our communities. 80% of DACA recipients say they can better support themselves and their families financially. DACA has also meant protection from deportation, allowing people to live without the fear of being separated from their families and communities. DACA has also allowed individuals to get a driver's license, opening up more work opportunities and removing the fear of a routine traffic stop ending up in an individual getting deported. The DACA program has not only benefited individuals who qualified for the program, but also their families and our communities at large. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the DACA-mented community really modeled how to get through the pandemic through community and caring for one another. Nearly 30,000 DACA-mented people were frontline healthcare workers fighting the pandemic. More than 200,000 essential workers were DACA beneficiaries on the front lines of COVID-19, including at every part of the food industry, from wholesale trade to transportation and grocery stores. Almost 15,000 DACA-mented people were also teachers who continued educating our children both virtually and in person. However, because the DACA program is only a temporary program, it still leaves many immigrant people with uncertainty around their future. The program is continuously challenged in the courts over and over again. And in September of 2017, the Trump administration even tried to end the DACA program. Thankfully, that decision was challenged in the courts. And in June of 2020, the Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration's decision to end the DACA program in 2017 was arbitrary and capricious. They said that the Trump administration did not give enough reasons why they had ended the DACA program, and because of that, stopped them from ending DACA. That Supreme Court victory came because of the efforts of more than 700,000 people in the DACA-mented community and their families, friends, and advocates. During his administration, though, President Trump continuously tried to end or break down the DACA program. However, DACA-mented individuals and immigration advocates challenged every one of those attempts in court. Through their tireless efforts, DACA-mented individuals and advocates were able to keep DACA alive during the Trump administration. And then during his first day in office in January of 2021, President Biden signed a presidential memo that committed his administration to keeping and improving the DACA program. This memo told the government agencies in charge of immigration to work with the Attorney General, the top lawyer for the president, to do everything they could to protect DACA under the current laws of the United States. The fact that this DACA memo was announced in the first day of the Biden administration was a testament to the efforts of the over 700,000 people in the documented communities, their families and friends, and immigrant rights advocates. Together with the vision of documented leaders, we created a cultural moment where DACA was a day one priority for our country's leaders. And today, 74% of voters in the United States say that dreamers should be able to live and work in the United States. However, we know that the fight for DACA is not over. In July of 2021, a judge in Texas ordered the DACA program to be partially ended. The ruling said that new DACA applications could not be approved, meaning that if a person was eligible for DACA but had never applied for DACA before, the government could still accept their application but could not give out new DACA permits. If a person currently had DACA, they were still protected and were able to continue renewing. To respond to that ruling, in September of 2021, the Department of Homeland Security proposed a new rule for the DACA program that would keep and strengthen the program. For now, the new rule means that the individuals who currently have DACA can continue renewing and their work permits remain valid. However, the program remains closed for new applicants. While this new rule was important, it did not go far enough to strengthen the DACA program. To this day, the government still needs to reinforce the new rule by making sure that both protections from deportation and work permits are connected and protected in the program. This new rule leaves open the possibility of removing work permits for hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients and just giving protection from deportation. However, DACA recipients need both protections from deportation as well as access to work permits. No one should have to live in fear of losing protection from deportation and being separated from loved ones. But also, no one should have to live with the uncertainty of whether they can provide for themselves and their families, depending on whether they will have a work permit. So while DACA is partially back after all the attacks it survived during the Trump administration, we need to keep working to protect and restart all of the program. More importantly, we know that the DACA program is only a temporary solution. So we also need to keep working for permanent solutions, including a pathway to citizenship for documented people. Currently, DACA is still being challenged in the courts, and the Supreme Court could potentially rule on whether the program is legal. So it is very urgent to find a permanent solution for our documented communities as soon as possible. In March of 2021, the Dream and Promise Act, a bill that would create a pathway to citizenship for 2.5 million DACA recipients, TPS holders, and deferred and forced departure DAD recipients, passed the House. But the bill needs to pass the Senate to become law. One thing we can do is call our senators to ask them to pass that bill. Permanent solutions that include a pathway to citizenship will honor the work of the documented people and will keep our communities safe by keeping families together.